everyone for joining us today. We have all our panelists with us, and thank you for joining ASID PAs today. And I will be kicking this off to Liz Kane, our professional development director, and our student representative of the board, Lindsay Bedford.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our first series in our, 2020 year of our webinar series for the upcoming ASID year. So yeah, we're really excited to have everyone here. The thesis presentation was an idea that we had to sort of connect all of our students and local schools and really sort of network and share some ideas. Being remote, a lot of us with school has been kind of challenging to learn from each other and grow within our own projects. So we thought this was a great way to highlight some past work and really gain some insights for the upcoming school year, whether you're planning your thesis right now or it's a couple years down the road. Regardless, I think it's going to be a great event. We have some really awesome projects and panelists here with us today. So we have a couple of housekeeping items that we'll just kind of kick off with before we get into it. So for those of you who don't know, ASID is the oldest, largest, and only design organization where its members encompass all aspects of design. And we also want to thank our sponsors. We all know this year has been very crazy and we appreciate your support. None of these events would be possible without everyone behind the scenes who is helping make our organization run. So thank you. And also we wanted to let you guys know that we do have a student rate currently for ASID membership. It is a one-time only membership fee. It's $85 and it's good for your entire school term. So the earlier you sign up, the better, because you can reap those benefits from being a student member your entire school career. And last but not least, our biggest event of the year is kicking off next Friday. It is our biannual awards gala. This is a huge event, and we are so proud of Kim for hosting this and regrouping and bringing it to us virtually. It was supposed to be in May. So definitely sign up and log in to watch. Word on the street is that we have a recipient who got a perfect score on the project, on one of the project submissions, which has never happened before. So I think we have had some really great entries, some really great projects, and there's a few student projects. So definitely check it out, if not just from really cool design inspiration. All right, so we have all of our panelists here. So before we begin, just want to introduce myself. Again, my name is Liz. I am the Professional Development Director at ASID in my second year term here. So again, we're very excited to have all of these events for the students and other professional development events that we have. And I'm also with my partner, Lindsay, so I'll kick it off to her as well.
Thanks, Liz. So as mentioned, my name is Lindsay. I am currently the student representative to the board. This is my first year. It's actually very exciting. I'm taking over for one of our panelists, Allison Kapler. So I have some big shoes to fill, but we're very excited to have you all join us today. We have some incredible presentations, some really interesting thesis work. So without further ado, let's kick this off and let's start with Ashley. Oh, but before that, please make sure, obviously we will be having questions for the panelists, but we would love to hear your thoughts and questions as well. So during the webinar, make sure you enter your questions into the Q&A feature featured below.
Should I just go ahead?
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Adams. I am a 2020 grad from Moore College of Art and Design. I just did my undergraduate degree there, and I am currently working at Tackett & Company in Philadelphia. So for our thesis at Moore, we had to choose a topic that was community-driven, that helped solve a problem through design. So for my thesis, I chose to focus on the over-medicalized approach to childbirth in the United States. And for that, I decided to design a birthing center. And it was kind of a small tribute to my mom, because she's a breastfeeding counselor. So this is my mom right here. And the center was called Nouvelle Vie, which means new life in French. Right, so the purpose of the thesis was to create a more holistic and welcoming environment for new mothers and families to experience this journey together, so they could find a sense of community and support from one another, whilst also having a more, more control over their experience and over their situation. As well as to, break the stigma surrounding natural childbirth and to create another option for mothers and families to explore for this. So the building that I chose is the Morris House Hotel. It is located in Washington Square West. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. So those are things that I had to think about while designing this project. I couldn't make changes to the exterior, but that was fine because it helped the overall vibe of what I wanted to accomplish with my center anyways. So it was, this building is made up of 3 separate buildings that surround one main courtyard. And I decided to choose this building because I wanted to utilize that courtyard space. So in order to use the space, I decided to build an atrium that closes the 3 buildings together to kind of create one overall space, one overall building for my center. So now the property is made up of 3 buildings, you could say. Building A, Building B, Building C, and then the atrium space. And I designed this atrium kind of with my overall knowledge of interior design. This would have been more something that I would think an architect would look into, but this was my rendition of what I thought. So the overall concept for my design was to create this space that lives and breathes under the canopy of my atrium, connecting all the separate interior spaces back out into the outdoors to, bring everything back to the basis of natural healing and natural childbirth. And a big part of my overall design concept was following healing architecture, which connects, the decisions that you make in design back to the human body and back to nature, so that you can help the space help you heal, which I thought was really important for natural childbirth. So this is my first floor plan. So you can see the 3 buildings here, the smallest building, Building A, the longest building, Building B, and then this L-shaped building, which is Building C. So I split each building up for different purposes. So we have support, we have community, and then we have birth. And then we have the one outdoor space here, and you can see that you can enter the outdoor space through each building. So there's access to this little weather-controlled atrium, which is like, I guess, kind of like a park that you can use all through the year. Next. So this is a perspective of what I would imagine that atrium space to feel like. Very warm, very lively, and like a small little park, little oasis in the center. So you can see there's different groupings of seating here. There's space for like a kind of like a cafe and then a lounge, as well as lots of grass and plants for mothers or families to, walk around or take a break or whatever it is, for whatever reason that they're at the center that day. So this is a video walkthrough of what it would feel like to walk through this space. So over here we have a more quiet lounge seating area between the two of the buildings, and there's lots of park benches, there's a small pond, and over towards the top there's a rooftop deck for yoga and other classes that can take place. And so this space was really important for me, so that it could be utilized all year round, even if it's freezing cold outside. So coming into the longest building at the top, this building is to help drive that sense of community. So in this floor, on the first floor, there's the reception area and then a cafe restaurant. So this is what the reception area would look like. The overall design that I wanted to go for was something that was softer, a little bit more feminine without being overtly feminine. A place that would feel more warm and inviting for families and for mothers without being at all like a hospital, but still as sophisticated and clean as a birthing center should be. And then this is an image of the cafe space. So this gives mothers and families the opportunities to bond with one another and support one another throughout their time at the center. And then you go upstairs in this building, we have 2 floors above that are broken up basically like this. There's a classroom to one end, and on the top floor, there's a library to the other end. On the second floor, there's a yoga studio. So these are more of the prenatal classes and exercises that mothers and families could participate in. So this is just a rendering of that library space where you can find the resources and information that you may need through your pregnancy. And then coming over into the birthing building now, this is what the ground floor of that building would look like. So we have reception and waiting area, as well as what I call an emergency birthing room. So in the event that you have a planned birth at this birthing center, but in the event that the baby is coming and you need to go in quickly, you just go straight through on the first floor. And this is what the reception area would look like. So I had to think about using a lot of large, comfortable pieces of seating for pregnant women and for little children and families, and everything had to be scrubbable and durable because this needs to be at a hospital grade finishes wise. So this is what the second floor of the birthing center, the birthing building would look like. There are 2 birthing rooms and 1 large family room that is broken up into 2 more private corners. So this is to allow the family and friends of the family that is having the birth to be present, but not in the room. They could be there to lend their support and to be part of the experience. And there's a small kitchenette in case, as births do, they can run late or they can take longer, go overnight, whatever the case may be. So this is another video walkthrough of what it would feel like coming out of the elevator into that first little family room. So we have the kitchenette and the different seatings available, through the door into the birthing suite and what that birthing suite might look like. So again, it's following that palette of softer, calmer finishes. Okay, so this is the, sorry if you could go back one real quick. This is the east birthing room. So all of the materials in this room are all scrubbable. All the woods and all the paneling that you see on the ceiling is all sound absorbent. And I designed these big wooden doors to close up and hide all of the storage, but open up easily so that the room can feel like almost like a hotel room when it needs to be, but can be as practical and modular as it to keep all of the equipment and the storage that's needed for birth. And this is what that room might look like closed up. You know, it's very clean, very seamless, so that it can be cleaned easily between births. And there's also a birthing tub in one of the suites, in one of the birthing rooms, if the family wanted to have a water birth, that's provided for. So I didn't talk about the smallest building in this, in the center, but that's kind of the support building where they would have meeting rooms and therapists' offices and consultation rooms to handle everything out, everything else that happens from pre to postnatal birth. So this section here can show you the cut through the birthing building as well as that smaller building that's mostly office spaces. And this second section shows you the stacking from the birthing building to the community building. believe that's it. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin, and I recently completed the 4+1 program at Jefferson University. So I did my undergrad, my bachelor's in interior design, and my master's in sustainable design. And for my capstone, I decided to do research on the educational system, the public school system, and how the built environment can affect it. So for my topic, I decided to do a language immersion middle school. And when I was doing my research and looking at different school types, language immersion became really interesting to me because being bilingual, I think, is very powerful in today's world, and understanding different cultures and really acknowledging the difference between everybody. So I thought this would be a great topic to kind of look at the different problems we see today in schools, where there's a lot of violence and bullying and gun violence and things in the world that are eventually connected to that later on in life when the students graduate. So for this, it's grades 5 through 8th, and it was a existing building in Philadelphia, around 80,000 square feet. And the main goal was to show that language immersion school can serve to unify two cultures within the public school system. So for this project, more than any other project that I've worked on, was my concept was stronger because I started with concept modeling and sketching and really just getting my ideas out as much as I can and trying to make the connection between learning back in the day and learning modern methods of teaching and how language can really be a role in that. So with language immersion, the students are taught in a different language in the different subjects. So math and science could be taught in Spanish or Mandarin. So I tried to get that out on paper and physically model it as much as I can, and came down with the main drive of integrating different layers of materials throughout the school. So for my site, again, it's in Philly. It's right behind the Franklin Institute. Currently, this building, they're condominiums, but historically it used to be the Board of Education building. So there was that educational tie that really emphasized the purpose of the project. And what I really liked about the site was the courtyard on the north side there facing 676, and how there were two different wings to the building. So traditional schools are kind of like this, where they have two separate wings for grade levels, and then they have the courtyard in the center. So this was one of the few buildings in Philly that I found that could work with the project. And then I also wanted to emphasize my design flow and talk about how it wasn't a linear process. I was constantly going back and forth between my research, between the problems, the solutions, and my site, what the site had to offer, what constrained me from doing what I wanted to do design-wise. But really researching my problem, like, had to go back constantly because I kept finding more problems and trying to address it with the design and trying to fit in sustainability and universal design as well. So that was a constant flow throughout the entire term. So this is how it relates to my project. The one statistic I found was by Forbes, and they say that only 20% of students learn a foreign language in the United States. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is over 80%. So this really drove my design to think about how we can really transform our educational system, because in America it's really outdated. A lot of schools have outdated construction, and they have issues with budgeting, so they're not able to update schools to really adapt to children's needs. And then again, my site, Philly, is very at this part of Philly, along the Ben Franklin Parkway, there are a lot of educational tools as well that could help with the school and partner with the school for different programs. So this is one of my main renderings on the second floor, showing the stairway connection, because this was one of my main features, and showing how the stairway can connect both sides of the building. So one side being the Mandarin learning side, and the other being the Spanish immersion side. And this was the social and physical connection that students could use between grade levels and have them really engage with each other with both languages. So this is a section through the entire building. So I only used the first four floors because the building was rather large for my program. So I actually had to create stairways to connect the part of the building that I was using. And then I also wanted to incorporate a historical feature from schoolhouses. So a lot of schools were derived from churches and how they took the bell to be like a symbolic thing for school. So I wanted to bring that into this design as well and tie it back to the Liberty Bell, which is another historic symbol for Philly. This is another main view looking at in front of the library area and having that be like a hub. It's where most of the students will be passing by to get to the stairs. And so I wanted to create another area where students can get engaged with the building itself and have the building be more of a teaching tool for them in between classes. This is a section through the courtyard. So I also had to design stairwells, fire stairwells, because the two ends of the building did not have that, being that it was older. So I included a kind of an Art Deco design because the building was from that era and I wanted to use the color palette from the interior. So trying to make this all ties together. And then this is a view outside of one of the classrooms. I called this home base for the students. So this is where the lockers are. And it's more of a me feeling because I wanted students to feel comfortable in the hallways, and feel that their belongings are safe. So these lockers are actually not metal lockers. They don't make noise like normal typical hallways from a middle school. So it's mostly to calm students and make them feel relaxed when they're going into classes or going between classes. If there's anything wrong, like the teachers have visible views into these spaces and they also get that nice daylight. So in conclusion, I just wanted to create a design that would embrace diversity and really break the communication barrier within our community. I believe that when you integrate cultures, you can celebrate them and students can be more aware of our differences. So by connecting this with the building and the environment and the interior, I feel that we can really kind of elevate that whole experience so it could be more holistic for everybody.
Thank you, Ashley and Caitlin. These presentations have been so incredible, especially for me as someone working on my thesis at the moment. But I want to make sure that everyone has enough time to hear everyone's valuable insight. So for the remaining presentations, can we try to keep it to around 5 minutes? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Allison Kaffler. I was the student rep for ASID for 2 years, and now I am acting as the director at large. I graduated from Drexel University's master's program in June, and I am a store designer for Anthropology and Urban Outfitters at the urban headquarters in the Navy Yard. So for my thesis, I have always loved historic interiors and historic buildings, so I really wanted to explore that more. And through my reading, I decided to have my topic be historic interiors and treating them as sociocultural artifacts, and how we can kind of view these interiors and spaces as artifacts, but still adapt them to be usable and not just like a museum that can't be touched. And so kind of how do we do that and cross that bridge with allowing people to fully inhabit a space, but still protect it at the same time. So my site was at 18th and Walnut. Actually, the Anthropology store is there now. I picked this building because I've always loved it, and it's one of the few remaining historic mansions in Philadelphia. So back in 1898, when this building was built, that whole neighborhood was all these beautiful historic grand mansions, and most of them have been torn down, but this one has been kept. It has been pretty well kept up, and the historic details are still there. So on this slide, what you're going to see are plans from the left to the right, or I'm sorry, from the right to the left, you're going to see. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't looked at this in a long time. So sorry, so the top is from 1898. So that's the original plan. So this was just for one family, this whole house. So you're going to have bedrooms there, an owner's suite, servants' quarters, a huge basement, boiler room, etc. Then in about the 70s, STORE came in and completely demoed the entire thing pretty much, and saved just the historic details that are still existing. And then in the early 2000s, Urban Outfitters Anthropology took it over and turned it into the retail space we have today. So my proposal was to sort of bring back some of that original programming. I made it a women's club and a space where women could get together and events could be held as they were when it was a mansion. There's networking possibilities, a cafe, and kept some of the original programming with the kitchen, dining areas, parlor, etc., which you'll kind of see as we go through. So for this project, I decided to go back to the basics and used AutoCAD so I could show as much historic detailing as possible. So on the bottom floor, we have sort of a cafe element. So previously in 1898, this was sort of a back of house area with a kitchen and servants' dining room, etc. So bringing back again some of that original programming here of a eating and cooking area. The middle floor is going to be a parlor again, bringing that back to the right where you kind of see those chairs. That's the original dining room. So I sort of brought that back in a new way with it being more of an event congregation space and not a formal dining room. At the top, sorry, at the next level, this is all a co-working space. So we have a library to the left, and a series of hot desks that you'll see in another section, and sort of a reading room as well. And then the floor above that served as a nursery, which is to the far left, so people could come drop off their kids. This is also the floor with a gym on it, so people can work out, a makeup and beauty room, so you can kind of get ready for your day or go ready for an event. And then the tippy top floor is the whole back of house floor with the staff that works in the building. So the idea of this program was just figuring out a way for women to come together from all different backgrounds and connect and kind of have a space that's theirs where you can, you know, have mimosas with your girlfriend or tea with your grandma, or, you know, meet new people. So this is looking towards the main entry. This is going to show a lot of historic features. So that door that is there now, Anthropology actually brought back, and it was the original historic door that they sort of recreated. So I altered it a bit to make it a little bit more accurate of the time period and kept that. Brought back all the original trim and moldings as well as the columns, and then tried to pick some kind of updated versions of what would have been traditional decorating elements at this time, like wallpapers and chinoiserie prints as well. And then every single piece of furniture has been sourced, majority being antiques that are brought back. Something else I wanted to focus on was having the user interact with this historic time period. So I sourced and brought in some historic touch points, quote unquote. So things like an exit sign that was typical of that time period, antique light switches, and I think there was a few more if we keep going. The next slide. Yes, perfect. So some elevator sconces, even the elevator buttons were thought about. So just kind of really getting into the nitty-gritty of the details. Which will bring me to another slide right after this. Again, letterbox, locks, outlet covers, everything. And then the next slide is a detail package example. So I really wanted to focus on historic interior details that were popular at that time in common, and kind of figuring out which ones to choose and doing that based on what was still existing and the historic photographs that I had of the space. And this is another example of some of the detailing I did. This is of a typical door jamb, kind of getting into the locks and the keys, and how that all comes into play. I think that's it. Cool, thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexa Rosenblatt. I graduated from Moore College of Art and Design this past May with a major in interior design and a minor in business, and I currently work at Marguerite Rogers Interior Design here in Philadelphia. For my thesis project, I did a cannabis wellness center called Emerge, and the reason I did this was I wanted to create a facility. You can go to the next slide, sorry. For medical marijuana patients to learn about and use medical marijuana. There are 23 qualifying conditions here in Pennsylvania, ranging from anxiety to PTSD for cancer patients and so on. So I wanted to create a space for people to get educated on the use and also to use it in a safe environment. And my facility also accommodates guests to stay overnight if they wanted to do a weekend trip, or they can just stop in for a day. The purpose of my facility is to kind of end the stigma around the use of marijuana in general. It currently still has this like bias around it. It's not down upon, but clients are already looking for more natural ways of pain relief. So creating the space and putting it in a more prominent area that's not hidden and people would feel more comfortable learning about and using it was really important to me. The building I chose was the Locks Gallery, located in Washington Square West. There's a lot of reasons why I chose this building, but some key points were it was very close proximity to 3 major hospitals in case patients are already receiving treatment. It's close to 3 dispensaries in Philadelphia because this would function as a BYOM. It doesn't have a dispensary built into it. It's in a was important to me with the juxtaposition history of hemp and have prominent today. So Washington Square West is prominently like a millennial area, or it's mostly millennials, which is normally more accepting of previously controversial topics. You can go to the next slide. My concept, I won't do this whole thing, but it was to really create a relaxing and ease space. So my concept shows a lot of smoke because smoke rising into the air and dissipating to me was like the release of stress and pain. So in my project, you'll see a lot of odes to smoke and curves and organic shapes. And that's all about like creating a sense of ease and taking a breath of fresh air, and just like smoke as it rises and the twirls kind of like dissipate. My floors are set up to be the most private at the top and the most public at the bottom. So here in the section, you'll see at the bottom, it's the most community area, and then as it goes up, it gets private. In this section, you can also see how I cut into the front on the left side of the building to create a space for a pool. And at the top, I created a rooftop bar and restaurant. These are my 3 floor plans all to each other. Again, back to my concept. You can see in the first floor plan, there's organic shapes in the floors and the architecture of the walls and the furniture. And as you go up in floors to the more private levels, the curves kind of dissipate a little bit, and you'll see a little bit in the architecture or in the furniture, but by the top floor, it's the most squared off. My first floor has reception, teaching kitchen, a cafe, and some admin. The second floor hosts most of the spa amenities, such as spa rooms, a pool, a sauna, and the unique smoking lounge. And the third floor is all hotel rooms, and to the second and third floor both have balconies. This is my first floor that shows a water and the stairs that connect the first and second floor. I'm going to kind of fly through these so we can keep going. This is a zoom up on my cafe first floor, and has some furniture and finished selections. And the next slide shows the rendering of that cafe. Something important to me in the first floor was because it's a very open floor plan, I didn't want to close up the first floor with a bunch of walls. So I had to use the floor finishes and the ceiling treatments to relate to each other, to really carve spaces to feel like they were designated areas. So in the cafe, I think it reads really well with that ceiling and floor relating to each other. This is the smoking lounge, which was like a very important room to me in this whole project because it doesn't really exist somewhere to safely and legally use your medical marijuana all together. So these are some finishes and furniture. And if you go to the next slide, that is the rendering for this room. Yeah, so again, with the ceiling and the floor treatments, I really tried to relate them all. This one has a unique hall of weed on the back wall. And we can just go to the next one. This is the typical hotel room setup. They're all focused on just kind of being comfortable, clean, and if you need to get out of all those community areas, your space here. And move on to the next one. This is what the hotel room would look like. And we can go on to the next one. So this is the roof, which I turned into a restaurant and bar. Could be like the biggest of community areas to really connect it with the outside and bring nature in. I split the roof in half to a atrium area that could be used all year round, and it has sliding doors that open up along the back wall, and you can open it up to the terrace to one giant room. And the next slide shows the outdoor terrace that has just a wooden pavilion top so that on nice weather you could be out there. If we're, yeah, this one. So this one connects you most with the outdoor. Directly across from this balcony is Washington Square Park. So this has the most outdoors intertwined with it. And overall, the purpose of my project was to create a space that just emits relaxation and ease. And whether you have a medicine journey or they're avid users, I wanted it to be a just overall accepting and a place that everyone could enjoy and learn. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Monica Waits, and I am a native of Houston, Texas, and my background is that I went to school at University of Florida for a civil engineering degree, and I studied transportation engineering for 7 years. And then I decided to go to Drexel University to pursue my passion of interior design. So I enrolled in interior architecture. And while there, I also majored in urban strategy. And currently I work for the Enterprise Center Community Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit out of West Philly. And I am a project management director. And I am in charge of construction projects. And so my thesis topic is how can design encourage vertical communities? And for in the vertical, can you go back one slide? There we go. How can design encourage community within a vertical neighborhood? And I wanted to kind of clarify that a vertical neighborhood is sort of like a mixed use development, if you like, just for clarification. Okay, next slide. So since my very first year in Drexel, I thought about my thesis. It wasn't required, but I'm a planner, so I think about things way in advance. And so at the end of our second year, our thesis advisor asked us a series of questions. It was like, who are you? What were your favorite courses? Just a bunch of things to get us like thinking about who we are essentially. And in all of the responses, it came back to that I was community oriented and I loved telling stories. So next slide. So then the process from there was like, okay, well, what is your thesis topic? Which mine was about community-oriented development. And so then you have to ask yourself, why does this matter? Like, who cares? And so for me, why it mattered for me was that there's a bunch of multi-generational families who are living together. And a lot of the things that developers are building are usually studio to 2 bedrooms, which don't account for families. And so then you have to ask yourself, okay, why does it matter? But then what's the solution? So there were a lot of ideas in my head and a lot of people just kind of weren't understanding what I was saying. So my thesis advisor was like, just draw it, write it down, get it all out. So that way I can kind of understand what you're saying. And through the process, you have to ask many questions. So like, what needs to be on the inside? What does a successful building look like? How should the interior feel? And like, what makes this space different than any other spaces? Next slide. So my project I came up with was the ginseng, and it's spelled incorrectly on purpose. The GEN part for ginseng stands for generation, and then the actual ginseng root is it's named because it looks like a person. It's a root that looks like a person, and so I named it for like people are the root of this building. And so I took the Airmark building, and because it satisfied the requirements that I was looking for. It was close to a transit hub, and there's kind of a food desert here, so there's a little bit of food on by 30th Street Station, but once you cross over the bridge, you don't get food until you get closer to like maybe 18th, 17th, so there was like a gap of food there. Next slide. So what I did was I didn't want, because it's a mixed use place, I didn't want the residents to stay inside of their building because the whole point is generating community. So I have the first 2 floors, and so on the bottom, you'll see, bottom left, you'll see those are the first 2 floors, and those are for the community. They can come in, and that's where the rest of the Philadelphia community can interact with those who live in the building, and that way you can create community, and it won't be just like a siloed community. And so you see that there's a stage there for different performing arts, and then there's the Harvest Food Market, which was a lot of kiosks for food. And then I also wanted to create visual opportunities for the residents that are in the building. So I made atriums, and all the doors, all the front doors open into like the hallway per usual, but I had open atriums so you can see on different levels, and you can maybe run into people who you see in the elevator. Next slide. And so one of the things that I found that was an accelerator for making, for people to make community and connections were children. So sometimes the children will find each other through playing, and then they'll become friends, and then eventually the parents become friends. So I wanted to have an indoor and outdoor playground for children. And so I created that at the center of the building. And so you can see it on the right-hand side where there's like these checkerboards. That is where the play area is, and it's open to all of the levels 5 through 9. My building is 9 floors. Building level 5 through 1 is for like the public, and then half of 5 through 9 is for private use only. And so at the top shows you, at the top left, you see an example of inside of one of the homes in this area. Each house has a front porch, which you can see on the right-hand side where there's the green and the wood, and they have windows that open out into the atrium as well. And so I also have units where they connect to each other. So it'll be a 4-bedroom, which is connected to a 1-bedroom. And that's so you have the multi-generational aspect where a family could live in one, and maybe like a grandparent or somebody could live in another, and you're still connected, but you still also have your own privacy. Some units are available for rent and some are for sale. Next slide. So how to present this, because we're on Zoom and it's a huge building. So what I did was I presented this project using storytelling. So I followed a girl named Allison, and yes, it was inspired by the Allison on the panel. And so, I took her, I made up a story of where she lived, what she did every day. And so I took them through the life of Allison. And while I was doing that, I showed floor plans and like her path through the building. Next slide, please. And so here's another continuation of her, and this is Allison with her dog Penny. And then I have at the top left who the people that she meets, and they follow through the story later. And then I have a key on the top right of where she is within the building, so that way you see the picture and then you kind of understand where you are. And so I did that for 3 different characters. I did Allison, David, and Margaret. And each of them had a different role. So Allison lived there. David was he worked in the area, and Margaret was just a person who visited from Philadelphia. And then after that, I broke down why I made the decision. So I went through these 3 people's lives in the building and how they interact. And then I broke down why I made the decision. So there are 3 different users, which is the worker, the resident, and the visitor. And then I went through the 3 different age groups of why I made the decisions that I did, because it is a multi-generational building. So I did what I provided for the children, the working age, and the retired or the elderly population. And then that was how I presented my thesis to everybody else. And that is all.
All right, thank you, Monica, and thank you, ladies, and everyone for presenting. So if you have any questions, we're going to move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. Feel free to submit anything via the chat, and we will be sure to answer any of the questions that you might have for the panel. So I guess kind of kick it off. Allison, the first question is for you. So obviously, thesis is a huge undertaking. There is, of course, requirements that the school has and details and sections and things you need to show. But I mean, how did you decide what to show, what was specific for your project, and what you thought would be, I guess, the biggest impact for your presentation?
So great question. Yeah, it's a huge project. For me, I had a historic building. I knew that's what I wanted to focus on. And so I just tried to think about what was going to kind of prove my point the best way. Because that's really what thesis is about, right? Like you have your argument and you need to win it basically against all these jurors. So I really wanted to focus on what made historic buildings unique and what a user would interact with that could make them feel like they were kind of part of a different era.
Great.
So I'm going to ask the next question to Monica. So Monica, you mentioned earlier, you're a planner. Day one, you're a planner, but still planners have to get started somewhere. So how and where did you get started with this process? And what was the first step for you?
When I first got to Drexel, I realized I had to do a thesis project. So I sat around and was like, what could I do my thesis on? What do I like? What do I not like? So I sat and like wrote just different topics, little things that I could do for like the 2 years. And I was going to do something for homeless people. And then after I realized that I was very community oriented, I switched into it. So I think just what do you like and what do you think that you would like to spend a year on?
That's great advice.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Alexa, the next question is for you. So what steps did you take to finish on time? Obviously, you have your deadline. How do you work backwards, and how did you kind of come up with a plan that was best for you?
Yeah, so like you just said, you have deadlines. It was very important to set personal deadlines on different strengths and weaknesses. So if you know your class requirements and your class deadlines, make perfect to yourself. For example, like between being AutoCAD and SketchUp, if you know you can run through a SketchUp or a Revit or a model like quickly, but you're a little slower in CAD, you need to really figure out what you work best doing, because it's impossible that we're all going to finish at the exact same time and be ready. You know, it's a focus on what you can do.
So my next question is for Allison. I know one of the things that I'm interested and excited about for part of my thesis project is my advisor, and to really build that relationship. And I wanted to know, how did you personally know who was the advisor for you? How did you know your perfect fit?
So another great question. We had the opportunity to do some networking at Drexel. We gave a speech and a podium event, and then you know, different people come up to you afterwards and you talk to them and kind of figure out who would work. So something we do there is talk a lot about precedents and how you kind of got into this idea of your thesis topic. So for mine, I really wanted someone who kind of understood my precedent topic. I was also looking for possibly someone that had some residential or hospitality experience. I knew I wanted to be more in that sector. My advisor actually ended up being someone that I had met before an ASID event, and I saw her there and I knew she was a residential designer. And so we were chatting, and what really I think drew me to her the most was that she really understood my concepts and about how historic interiors really impacted behavior at the time, and you know, kind of that more residential element of a site I'd be looking at as well.
I think it's also really great and important to note that ASID helped you foster that connection with your advisor. I'm definitely keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I met her at the ASID annual meeting, I guess last year, 2 years ago. and was chatting with her then, and I knew she had worked with PEAT students before, and so just kept that conversation, that relationship up, and she's become a great mentor now too.
Awesome. Caitlin, the next question is for you. So of course you have your mentor and you're coached and guided with that. But what other resources did you use to sort of shape your project and to kind of get some background for how you might shape your design?
So one of my main resources was my case studies and visiting those case studies. So there were a couple of language immersion schools in Philly that I was able to visit, and I was able to talk to the people who work there and really kind of assess how their school is going currently and how I can implement those problems into my design and how my design can be the solution for that. And really looking online at other case studies as well. So Arc Daily became really important. The whole building design guide online, kind of giving me that starting point of what I needed for my program for an educational building type.
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right, so my next question, I actually wanted to ask Ashley and Caitlin. Obviously, we saw a lot of really interesting projects, and I think it's safe to say that a lot of different programs were used to create those results. How did you decide on what software to use for your project? How about we start with Ashley?
Okay, so I think that before tackling a project like this, you have to understand that it's a really, really big project to undertake. So I thought it was best to utilize the software that I was most familiar with and that I felt most confident using. So for me, that was AutoCAD and SketchUp. And I also felt that in creating the things that I wanted to graphically represent in my project, I felt that SketchUp was the best program for me to use in that. For example, in building that atrium, the conservatory roof, I was able to sculpt that fairly easily in SketchUp. And then I even taught myself how to use Enscape because I really wanted to use the video walkthroughs because I felt like that helped tell the story more. And then when you're thinking about the renderings themselves, I try to use a watercolor technique with my renderings because I felt that it was softer and helped communicate the feeling of the space more. So Photoshop was a really great tool in perfecting that overall feeling through the renderings. So it's really all about feeling out the programs that you will work best for your project, for your individual project.
I love that you also took the time to learn new software because it shows it really added to your project overall. Caitlin, what do you think?
I agree. So I had to use Revit for mine because the year prior I had just learned it. So I was still in the learning process during my whole senior year. Really using Revit for my thesis kind of helped me strengthen those skills, and it ended up showing in the end. I was really proud of my work that I was able to model those stairs in Revit and have all those beautiful colors really stand out.
That's great, thank you.
So the next question is from Monica. So how did you select your site? I mean, is there documentation existing that you found? Did you have to kind of hunt that down? I mean, how do you kind of go about that process of picking a building and then figuring out, the existing floor plan for it?
I wanted a vertical neighborhood, but for me, in Philadelphia, blocks are like long, so I wanted a longer building that was short, and then also I wanted one that was near transit, because if you're going to have a neighborhood, like part of that is transit, so it was like a transit hub. And so 30th Street Station was there. And then how I got the plans for it was coincidentally, I was working with somebody else on another project, and the architect who had the plans I had already met before, didn't know that. And so I just emailed them and I was like, hey, can I get the plans? And they were like, well, I mean, it's top secret. And I'm like, okay. And so they sent it to me anyways. But I just emailed them. And I will say that if you do want plans, I urge people to get them as soon as they can. Like, it's best kind of over Christmas if you're starting in January, just because then you can have it, the plans, clear them out and whatever, like get it ready for when you actually start working on your thesis. So yeah, so start early. Because some people are MIA with communications.
And actually, this is a question from a panelist or attendee that I just saw. Along the same veins, and I'll open it up to anyone's. I mean, the same question. I mean, did anyone else have difficulty getting the site plan or the floor plans from, you know, the architects or the existing building manager, or was it more just you're a student, this is for your thesis, you know, no problem at all?
I can like take a stab at that. So for mine, I was obviously looking at historic buildings, but I think just kind of talking to people in our cohort, I think it really helps if you don't get married to a building. Like if you see a building, you're like, oh, this is it, I'm going to do this one. Like make sure you have all the documentation you can possibly get and have some backups. Like even if you have a number 1, have a number 2 and 3 with plans. And you can usually get plans, especially if you have a historic building, you can get them pretty easily because there has to be documentation. At the Athenaeum, I think it is that you can get them. And, or if you have friends that work at firms, you can always ask like what buildings they're working on and they might have plans for you too.
Sorry, I also find that it helps to work backwards as well. So like for me, I had a lot of difficulty getting my plans, but I actually went to the building and I spoke with someone at the building who put me on to the owner, who put me on to somebody who would have plans, who put me on to somebody else again. And it's just kind of following whatever trail you can possibly find to get the plans, because there are plans that exist and it's just about asking the right person.
I feel like that's a great way to go into our next question. Who did you go to for advice? I wanted to ask Alexa specifically, but I'm laughing because I think to myself, my answer is everyone on this panel. But I want to know for your process, who did you talk to? Who really helped you? Alexa. You know, just in case we lose Alexa, perhaps someone else could answer for me. Caitlin, do you think you could help?
Everyone stresses.
So I think this kind of goes back to the question of advisors, because they really do become supplemental in the entire process. So for me, I went to all of my professors that were involved in my design career at Philly. So from like my first design professor all the way to my capstone professors, even professors from different classes that I interviewed, and I wanted to gain insight on how different teaching methods apply, because sometimes they can really give you like their own perspective, no matter what grade level. Teaching students can be really difficult, and having like their opinions on how the classroom can really emphasize that learning process. So that was helpful for me to gain.
That is really helpful. Thank you. I think maybe Alexa's back. Love to hear your thoughts.
Can you hear me now? Am I okay? Okay, sorry. I was gonna say, just like you said, how everyone ID. I can tell I'm freezing again, aren't I? Okay.
Tech is tough.
Just my answer.
That's okay. I think we're all familiar with tech issues now with this Zoom life. How about we go on to the next question?
That is a great transition, because the next question is, so how did you guys present virtually? I mean, are there any tips? What can you share? I know from my experience, I feel like formatting for a PowerPoint presentation takes 10 times longer than formatting it for print and having a big kind of talk through of things. So what can you share to help make that process easier, or whatever, however you kind of got through it? You know, you guys are the first, seems like, graduating class to really have to deal with virtual presentations for everything.
Is that for everybody?
We had it for Alexa, but anyone can chime in for this as well, and or Ashley too.
Well, I think that the best thing here is kind of like what Monica said about storytelling, because you're not having everything up all at once for people to look at all the time. You have to kind of stage your work so that you tell a story in the cleanest, most careful way so that everybody follows you all the time. The worst thing is to have somebody be confused and then they can't understand. So for me, I had 3 buildings. So I had a little plan of my buildings in the corner so that you could see what I was talking about all the time so nobody got lost. But with regards to actually presenting, I think it's really important to put yourself in a quiet space where there'll be no exterior interruptions, nothing that can distract you, so that you can be as calm and focused as you can be, and preparing and practicing as much as you can. All my classmates and I, we practiced presenting with each other before, the night before, the couple days before, so that we knew that what we were showing would work, and that we wouldn't run over time, and we would have all of our words together properly. And it doesn't hurt to have notes with you as well. Presenting virtually, we can read off a little bit more notes than we could if we were presenting in person.
I wanted to chime in and say that the practicing is also very key. We did the same thing the day before. We ran through our entire slide just to say, okay, I don't understand that. Can you speak more about that? That's too much. So that way we could really provide any audience members like what we were actually trying to say by running through it with your friends first. So peer help is really good.
All right, so next question. I want to ask Alexa, do you have any tips for staying motivated and connected to your process? to your project? We all know that thesis is a difficult and long process, so I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I hope I can answer this clearly. I think that this goes back to really when you're choosing your topic and making sure that you're choosing a topic that you have a connection to, or you feel really, really important, or you feel important. When you're getting roadblocks, them a lot easier if you have that connection with them. You're going to hit roadblocks either way, whether you pick off a list or you pick your favorite topic. But I think that if your topic has to do with something with your family or your friends, talking to them about it can help reignite excitement. Visiting your site, visiting case studies, anything that has to do with why you chose it will kind of help push you through and remind you this is why I wanted to tackle this. This is why I wanted to fix this issue. And just really making sure that don't just pick a random one off a list. You have to feel something for it. And yeah, that's what helped me get through.
That is great advice. I think especially as interior designers, we are designing for the humanistic part of it. So if you can relate your project back to someone and really get firsthand feedback, and it's something that's impactful and meaningful to you, I think that really is a great way to make sure that your project is the best it can be. So I know we have a couple ladies on the panel here who have been working during school and having internships. How do you balance your time at the office, personal life, school life, the cost of everything? How can you share some advice for someone who might be going through a similar situation? If it's either for Allison or I know Ashley as well.
So I started working about 30 hours a week in September of my thesis year. And then by February, I was up to 40 hours a week. And so I was also in school full time. And I think my best advice that worked for me was to wake up really early. So it was tough, but your body does get used to it. And so I would wake up at about 4:30 and try to get 4 hours of schoolwork in for work. And then I would usually come home and then from my job, and then I would work for another 3 or so hours. So I think that really helped, just kind of having that structured program, being totally transparent with your bosses and your teachers about what's going on, if you have to leave or whatever your schedule is. And I guess like personal life wise, like you do have to have a personal life. I really believe that. So I think just prioritizing like week by week what you need to get done. And also I've bought a lap desk, which I really recommend if anyone doesn't have one. So you can do schoolwork and have a glass of wine and watch Friends on your couch, and it makes it a lot better.
All right. So, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Do we still have time for another answer? Yeah. Okay. I agree with a lot of what Alison said. I think that especially if you're working in the design field, at the same time of being in school, your boss and your coworkers will be a lot more understanding and will be pretty excited about your thesis as well. So I actually found that speaking to my coworkers about my thesis helped a lot, because I was getting professional advice for free, you know, while I was at work, and finding a good balance between work and school is really important. But at the end of the day, like right now where you're at, your schoolwork is your priority, and your career, your boss will understand. So having a good balance between the two, but also in the back of your mind prioritizing schoolwork is really important. And for me, I juggled it fairly well, and it all comes down to time management, I think. But I would give significant amounts of my weekend time to just being alone with my work quietly, where I could regroup my thoughts at the end of the week. And I think that helped not to go insane. But I know between Alison and I, this sounds like you're just doing work in school all the time, and it might be kind of scary and intimidating for new students doing thesis. But once you find that balance, it'll be smooth sailing from there.
It really does just become like kind of your normal schedule, and it's not as like horrible, I feel like, as it sounds. Yeah, I totally agree, Ashley.
That's really helpful insight. I know that's something I'm personally trying to balance and figure out myself. So definitely taking those into consideration. Another thing I'm curious about, I'd like to ask Monica. I thought it was really interesting how you used your dual major to really influence your thesis project. How did you personally feel that you used these two sets of knowledge you have to strengthen your project overall?
It was kind of hard at first to figure out where I would go with my urban strategy part. I knew I wanted to go over my interior part, but the urban strategy part was challenging at first. But then my urban strategy thesis was, how can I create community-oriented retail that supports a multi-generational vertical neighborhood? So that's why my thesis pretty much designed the entire building, because I was doing two theses. So one really informed what was on my first two levels, because those two levels were for the community. And that was really insightful, because my research was on retail, and it happened during the middle of COVID, which is where retail just took a plummet. So it was really interesting to see what has happened, what was happening, and like how we can move forward. So it was like I was at the crux of all of these things that were changing. So it was great. It helped inform my design for sure, as far as what needs to be in the space and what's lacking in the area of Philly.
That's cool. And I think we all have different experiences and knowledge. You don't think about it, but those are things that should really influence your thesis. And I think it's really cool to see how you did it. So now I wanted to ask everyone in general, do we have any final thoughts? Is there anything you wish someone told you about the process? And this is for everybody.
I have a small comment. I didn't realize how much I was going to, like we were talking about roadblocks earlier. I didn't think that there was going to be a point where I was like multiple times going to sit there and be like, I can't do this. I give up. Like, I hate this. Why did I choose this? Like, and you just start getting into those negative. And you might think in the beginning, like, oh no, I've got it all planned out. I'm smooth sailing. But like, it's okay. You're going to hit those points. It kind of goes back to that question that I was answering before. But just in the beginning, I just wish I knew that it was okay to feel those lows, because constant high and low throughout this like process, and it's normal. If I would have known it was normal, I wouldn't have been so freaked out.
Yeah, I also agree with Alexa, and I think that part of facing those kinds of challenges is having people that support you around you. I spent a significant amount of my thesis working in the studio with my classmates all the time. I would stay there as late as I possibly could because it really helped for me to be around like-minded people who were going through the same things that I was going through at that point, where I could scream and cry and be happy with them, and they understood, and we were able to support each other. So as much as you can, I know that with COVID times everything is pretty remote, but if you can find support in one another and help motivate each other, it helps so much.
That's great. And I think we just have one final question. So day of your presentation, what advice can you give to someone, you're waking up in the morning, you're stressed, you're anxious, you're nervous. What can you help someone who might be going through that to kind of put them at ease and just sort of help them, have the best presentation after all of this work that they've done for the whole year?
I think my advice would be to practice your presentation until you are sick of it. I even writing some stuff down for today, I was had these words going back to my original presentation. And then when you practice it that much, I know for me and some of my members of my cohort, we all had a goal of getting our project done earlier than it was due. So we had extra time to practice. And just keep running through it. And then day of, crush it, just kill it. You know what I mean? You don't need to be nervous. You've got it. No one knows this better than you. So just keep your confidence, and you did it. And then it's done. And it's a really great feeling to be done with thesis.
That's awesome. I'm going to send my email to everyone in the chat here. If you have any follow-up questions or anything else that you want to ask the panel, feel free to shoot me a note, and we will share it out and make sure your question's answered as best as we can. And yeah, thank you everyone for participating, for joining, and for watching this. We just want to reiterate again, if you do have any questions about membership for any of the students that are listening, again, feel free to email me or Lindsay, and we can put you in touch with the form online to fill out. But yeah, we hope this is beneficial for you. And again, any questions or any feedback, just email us. And the recording will also be available on our YouTube page probably in a few days. So take a look at that if you want to share that out to anyone who might have missed this. Yeah.
Thanks, guys, for having us.
Thank you, everyone. This is great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Thank you.